Hi, Rohit. We'll be starting in next couple of minutes. I think we are good to go. I hope I'm audible to all the panelists.
Yes, perfectly.
Great.
Yeah.
So, good afternoon, all, and welcome to this Diwali special. Thanks for joining us on Street Experts today for another interactive afternoon with our expert panel. I'm Akanksha Shukla, your host for the event. I'm heading products desk at mastertrust. Samvat 2080 has been absolutely fantastic year for investors. A near 30% rise in the Nifty since last Diwali. The pumping of the retail money into the market looked unstoppable in Samvat 2080. The question though is, what will Samvat 2081 hold for stock markets? I have with me a panel for an insightful discussion on the same. So let me quickly introduce the panel for today's discussion. Mr. Rishi Kohli, Managing Partner and CIO Hedge Fund Strategies Group, Incred Alternatives. With over 23 years of experience, Rishi specializes in quantitative hedge fund strategies and has pioneered options and managed futures research in India. He previously led India's first quant hedge fund and has won multiple global awards. Before Incred, he held leadership roles at Avendus and co-founded Lambda Quantitative Strategies Association. Welcome.
Thank you, Akanksha. Happy to be here.
Our next guest is Mr. Rohit Agarwal, Senior Executive Vice President, Kotak Life Insurance. With 2 decades of experience in capital markets, Mr. Agarwal currently serves as a senior leader at Kotak Life. He was previously associated with JP Morgan for 6 years before joining Kotak in 2011. A warm welcome to you, Rohit.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Our third panelist, Mr. Ashutosh Bhargav, Head of Equity Research and Fund Manager, Nippon India Mutual Fund. Ashutosh has 19 years of experience in investment research, specializing in macro, asset allocation, and rule-based strategies. He has been with Nippon India for 17 years and previously worked as an analyst with JP Morgan's Global Economics team. Great to have you all here. Season greetings and a very happy Diwali.
Same to you. Thank you.
Thanks, and same to you.
For our audience, please feel free to drop in your questions in a Q&A section, which will be taken up at the end. Thank you once again all for joining us. India, on fundamental side, remains the fastest growing economy globally and is riding on multiple levers of demographic dividend, huge economic domestic market, make in India, unicorns, infrastructure development, and so on. But I would like to start with something which is going on, like FII selling, which we have seen. FIIs have pulled out a massive 93,000 crores from Indian equities in October so far, which has been the 4th largest episode of outflows by foreigners. I would like to know, and the audience would like to know, why exactly has this happened? And we would like to start with you, Rishi, first.
Sure. Thanks. So yeah, I mean, this is the hot topic, and recently, of course, the numbers have been coming in as the largest outflow this year, and of course, I think in the last 4 years as well, since COVID. Of course, there are multiple reasons for this. I think last few months also, markets have been tentative. There have been, intra-month declines that have got recovered finally, but I think the signs were there, and that has sort of come in finally this month. And it is a mix of factors. So obviously, the tentativeness that has already been seen over the last few months relates more to the markets becoming more expensive, having overshot on the upside, both fundamentally, technically. It was sort of overstretched both from a PE perspective as well as on the technical side. So that was already there, and I think some of the initial selling is also sort of linked to that. And then, of course, you had the Chinese stimulus, right? And that has been a lot talked about over the last month. And of course, that did trigger some rebalancing of the flows, because as we know, last few years, there have been a lot of emerging market flows that have come to India. The weight of India in the emerging market indices has gone up quite a lot over the last few years as a result, and Chinese weights have come down. Of course, the moment a stimulus comes and a lot of global reallocation happens, whether it be from real money, the real large, long only funds or hedge funds, all of them combined has this effect of flows going from one market to the other, at least in the near term. I think in the long term, it would have lesser impact. But in the near term, you have a certain pool of capital. You would reallocate it as best as possible for you to, capitalize on whatever opportunities are there. So I think that became the larger reason. But the other things that I said, the overstretch on the from a P valuation side, from a technical side, I think all of that was already in play. So on a combined basis, all of this, I think, has led to the FPI outflows happening. And then, of course, very smaller and near-term reasons like the geopolitical risk, those kind of things happening, the upcoming US elections. All these are potential risk factors. And when there are so many risk factors in a short span of time, then, globally, at least the FPI investors tend to be a little cautious going into such periods. So all of this has come together basically in this month is my conclusion.
Thank you, Rishi. Rohit, I would like to know your views as well on this recent outflow that has happened by FIIs.
Oh, well, as Rishi pointed out, one startling data to actually look at is one common belief is that money got moved from India to China. Actually, if you look at the data, it doesn't suggest so. China, even after the stock market going up, which was in a very brief period, and now, if you actually see, China has not really seen too much flows. So where has the money gone is the question. If you look at Indian market, the FIIs own broadly 20% of the Indian equity. So give or take, if you assume India's market cap, the listed market cap to be about $3 trillion, they own about $600 billion of Indian equities. So they have sold about $10 billion out of that, which is very less, hardly moves the needle. Yeah. But we are all talking about it because it is the highest month of outflows ever as a month. Yeah. But you have to bear in mind that there are obviously a confluence of factors. And in my opinion, apart from one country looking better than the other, it is eventually the individual country's earnings that drive flows. There can be a lead or lag of a couple of quarters here and there. My point is, eventually, money follows earnings. If you look in India, post-COVID and pre-COVID, there were two phases. Pre-COVID, for 5 years, there was a case where Indian strategists would make an attempt to guess the Nifty earnings, which would be typically, say, 12 to 15 to 16% at the start of the year. And for 5 years in a row, the earnings turned out to be suboptimal at 4 to 6 to 7%. However, the same changed after COVID, where people expected earnings to grow at 10, 12, 13%, 13, 14%, but the companies gave much more than that, and hence you saw what happened to the markets. So my point is, markets eventually reacted to earnings and not just flows. Flows are a function of eventual earnings or expectation of earnings. For the first time after COVID, this quarter, even though the earnings season is just on, the first part of the earnings season always tends to be better than the second part, because the general belief is that the better companies and the companies which have good numbers tend to declare their numbers earlier than some companies who tend to declare at the 45th day or the last 5 days. That's the general belief. This time, however, although we have not even seen 1/3 of Nifty companies reporting their numbers, there is already going to be an EPS cut, in our opinion, to the extent of 4 to 5% for this year's earnings. So for the fall of market that you have seen for 7, 8%, 8, 9%, 4 to 5% is directly attributable to earnings, and not just geopolitics, not just China, and not just any other factor. So in my opinion, obviously those factors also make a difference. That when you saw suddenly China moved up because there was a huge short position there and people scrambled to cover their shorts. But it's not that they have sold India and got there. India suddenly has some issues on its earnings where you see consumption is slowing down. There is some first signs of chinks in India's armor on the whole economy or the consumption side. You saw a couple of names which reported yesterday and before were talking about urban consumption slowing down. So, in my opinion, although the China factor is there, the geopolitics is there, the US election is there, I think the biggest factor remains earnings. And that slight disappointment, given the elevated valuations that we trade at, is what, in my opinion, has triggered it.
Thank you, Rohit. That's a wonderful insight. Ashutosh, would you like to add something here?
Well covered by Rishi and Rohit. Just one thing, typically, flows, uh, foreign flows, also look at the policymakers' behavior. There's a saying that, as investors, you should only panic when policymakers are not panicking, and vice versa is also true. So if you see where is the policy panic globally, it's in most Western markets where there is interest rate cuts which are happening, and recently in China. And this, as Rohit mentioned, in the backdrop of relative earning disappointment from India. Although my personal belief is that some of the recent decline in earnings could be exaggerated because because of the one-off factors which have happened in the first half of this fiscal. It could be, initially was general elections, then because of which there was some growth slowdown. Later, there was issue related to, the festive season starting late, monsoon being a bit stretched, etc. And last but not the least, India remains dependent on government spending, which was also very low in the first half. There are signs that some of these things are already recovering, although it will be visible in data maybe in 1 or 2 months lag. So maybe the extent of earnings cut may not be as large as for 5%, but definitely the start of the earnings season, there is a lot of panic, there's a lot of question mark about the stellar relative earning outperformance that India had shown, which led to the market outperformance in the last 3, 4 years. So this is where we are, and I think if we start to see the reduction in both monetary and fiscal drag on the economy, which shall get reflected in the data in 2, 3 months' time, maybe in auto sales and some other durable sales data. My personal belief is that FIIs would come back, mainly because they are already very underweight on India. India is one of the largest underweight within global emerging markets, and if earnings settle somewhere in the next few days, earning cuts settle in some few days, I think we should not be too bothered. As a matter of fact, as my last statement, since 2015, the FII flows in secondary market is zero. So there is no money which has come on the secondary market side. There has been some money which has come on the primary market side, and the burden of heavy lifting has been squarely on the shoulder of domestic investors. As long as there is no worries related to domestic flows, beyond the point, I think we should not be too much worried about foreign flows. And there were market was looking for reasons to correct, and Rishi and Rohit talked about those reasons well.
So, Ashutosh, since there has been an FII outflow, there's also earnings season, which we'll eventually talk about. And also, but parallelly, we have this festive season. So, what do you expect? Is this correction, is this volatility going to continue through Diwali, or will there be a period of stability?
There are two parts to the whole consumption season, consumption trends, which is related to the festive season.
Yes.
There's something very structural about Indian consumption. We think that interest rate or RBI matters more to corporates, those who borrow and those who do capex. In this part, this time, this cycle, the consumers are extremely leveraged. That's where regulator is also worried. They are the one who are having maximum impact of whatever 250 basis point rate hike we have seen in India, and that with the lag we are seeing in urban consumption in particular. There was worries related to food inflation. I'm sure that has also had an impact on urban consumption in particular. And the factors like, government was slow to spend, and festive season this year starting with a lag. My personal belief is if you look at the commentary of the companies, there will be some payback of whatever loss that has happened. And festive is not as bad as, the September data tells us. It is perhaps better than that, but the real sustainable recovery in consumption, to my mind, will happen when there is the earnings cut, when there is this cut in the EMIs, and there is more inducement for the consumer to spend. And for that, I think it may take some more time, but it is definitely not as bad as what September earnings are telling us.
Okay. Okay. Rishi, what is your view on the same? What do you think? How much will there be a period of stability, or we are going to see this volatility for the upcoming quarters?
Yeah, so I mean, as you and everyone knows, I am obviously more on the quant and systematic side. So I would, answer some of these more short to medium term sort of views from both a quant and a technical and a cyclical kind of perspective. So from that angle, when I look at it, in fact, from the last 1 or 2 months, the view that had been forming was that from now to March is going to be a very difficult period. And some of these factors that Ashutosh and Rohit are talking about related to earnings and other things around it on the fundamental and macro side are sort of also corroborating that in some sense, right? So the view that is forming is that till March, it is going to be a difficult market. There are pockets, so seasonality and cyclicality works very well actually in these periods. Typically, you do have a lot of volatility in October. We've seen some of the largest declines and the largest up moves also in October. We all remember the big falls. We don't sometimes remember the big moves up, but largely it has been a month always of large moves, right? And post that, November, December, typically the trend post mid-November to end December, New Year's has been of an up move in the market, especially if markets have fallen into that period, which is the roadmap that the market seem to be following right now. That you've gone down a little bit, it's very likely markets remain tentative and a little volatile till at least the US elections, right, which is in early November. And then post that, you get that typical seasonal bounce. It is very likely that happens, and coinciding with the festivities and other things from Diwali to New Year. And then post that, typically Jan Feb also sees a volatility. So that roadmap is largely, mapping to the technical and macro views that are all aligning together at this point in time, according to me.
So a couple of quarters of volatility before we see probably
Yes. And it's very
stepping.
likely, you saw that in that October 21 to March 23 period. You had these pockets where you had all these technical, cyclical and fundamental factors aligning. I think you could have some of those pockets happening over the next few months as well.
So also last Samvat trading year, we saw capital goods, realty, auto perform really well, though banks lagged behind a little. What trends, Rohit, you see for Samvat 2081?
Yeah, okay. So before that, I would just like to add a little bit on your previous question.
Yeah.
That obviously, in our opinion, or my opinion, this is, in my opinion, the first signs of some, not stress, but visible problems that are starting to come. And those problems I would want to list down. Don't take me as bearish. What I'm trying to suggest is from now on, at the valuations that we trade at, if we falter, the room for error doesn't exist. Okay. Look at the MFI industry. That industry is 4.5 lakh crores in India. In my personal opinion, that industry will see a 10% write-off. Okay. So that's the stress on the rural side where it is a case of over leveraging and the cash flows as well. Then you move to unsecured personal as well as credit cards. These two segments will also see pain. It is not about the segments. What it tells you is that there is already pain in the economy where people have a problem of over leveraging or their cash flows not being enough to take care of all their expenses. The RBI was cautioning for the last 6 to 9 months. The markets ignored it. Okay. The RBI tried to tighten the noose at many places. The markets ignored it. Now, if you look at what is starting to happen in the numbers of MFI, unsecured personal loans, and credit cards, is increased delinquency. They are still not alarming. They will not balloon and they will not go out of hand, but there will be reversion to mean, and that will be little painful simply because we are now not used to seeing that credit cost. In my opinion, you will see credit costs, delinquencies rising in these segments for the next 6 to 9 months easy, because these things do not change in 1 or 2 months or quarters. And when you speak to bankers, you can easily see the cohort, because for somebody to become an NPA, first he has to become delinquent on day zero, right? On his payment due date. He becomes NPA only after 90 days. So as a banker, you can see that the data of each cohort of delinquency is deteriorating. If that is deteriorating, that is good enough sign for you to tell what is coming in the future. Now, coming to what we like going forward. Yeah. So given that backdrop, where we believe that there is going to be stress in those segments and some select pockets, even urban consumption, we are not too fond on consumption as of now. Okay. So that clearly the logic flows from that. There is stress on cash flows, urban as well as rural. Okay. What we
Yeah.
do like for not just this year or over the next 3 to 5 years is something in which India was not yet or was not self-sufficient or was importing. Things like electronics, yeah, make in India, PLI schemes, all the things where we believe we are either going to replace imports from China or become either an alternative to China, or first make for India and then make in India. So those segments are quite a few. Let me list down. Data centers. There is a regulation now that India's data needs to stay in India. Okay. There's only 900 megawatt to 1 gigawatt of data center capacity in India. That data center capacity in India in the next 6 years is going to go to 6 gigawatts. Okay. So that is the space we like. Renewable energy. India today has about give or take 100 gigawatt of solar energy. That is going to go to 400 gigawatt or so in the next 5 years. That is very clear. So you see the growth, we like that space. Recycling as a theme. In India, for the first time, now the producer is responsible to recycle his products. Otherwise, he has to pay a charge. So there will be recycling companies which have come up in India, which will become very, very big. Just to give an example, for example, if you're using a Dell laptop, Dell is now bound by regulations to recycle an X percentage of what he makes. So it has to come back. There is no organized system that is available in India. So everything which is recyclable will start to get recycled in India in an organized way. We like recycling as a space as well. Battery chemicals, which is our theme on EVs. Again, why? India wants to lower its dependence on China in terms of lithium-ion batteries and the whole EV value chain. There will be more and more lithium-ion battery plants or the whole supply chain ecosystem which will come in India. We like that. Mobile space, the EMS space, which was the first make in India, where first to get off the blocks was mobile phones. Then you saw Apple coming in. Now, Apple has targets to do $25 billion of exports in the next 2-3 years from India. But all of that to start with is a lower value addition where you just import and assemble. Now, Apple is saying that I want to set up the ecosystem of the parts in India, which essentially means if I were to make $25 billion, at least he wants to take $10-15 billion of raw material from India itself, the supply chain. So these are all the themes put together, the new age themes, which were not available in India. In my opinion, there will be at least 5 to 10 companies out of this, which will become multi-billion-dollar market caps over the next 5 years. And it is not just for the next Samvat, in my opinion, where you need to buy. India needs it. At the same time, the government is pushing it. If you see how government of India is behaving, they are going to the corporate and saying, you tell us that for you to put capex in India, what do you need? We will either give you PLI, either we will give you import protection, or we'll give you DLI in semiconductors, which is also a space which will do very, very big in India. Government has come with design linked incentive instead of production linked incentive. So all of these sectors, which are new age sectors for India as a country, is something which we are very bullish on, not just this year, but as a multi-year theme.
Interesting. Like for making India that 5 trillion economy that most people are talking
Yes.
about. Interesting, Rohit. Ashutosh, what would be your favorite sectors while we talk about Summer 2081?
आकांक्षा, वन सेक्टर जो हमें पसंद है, उसका रिप्रेजेंटेशन हमारे काफी सारे पोर्टफोलियोज में भी है. दैट्स पावर. एंड पावर इज अ थीम, इज समथिंग विच इज अ ग्लोबल थीम. सम ऑफ इट विच रोहित आल्सो alluded to. अगर आप देखें द होल चेन ऑफ पावर, राइट, जैसे कि पावर यूटिलिटीज कंपनी, ट्रांसमिशन कंपनीज, इक्विपमेंट प्रोवाइडर, स्पेसिफिक फाइनेंसिंग कंपनीज केटरिंग टू दैट सेक्टर. आई थिंक ये 3 से 5 साल का इसमें डिमांड सप्लाई मिसमैच क्लियरली दिखता है. सम ऑफ द थिंग जो रोहित ने बात करी, ईवीज की बात करी या डेटा सेंटर्स की बात करी, हम जो भी टेक की बात कर रहे हैं, ऑल ऑफ देम आर वेरी पावर इंटेंसिव एंड देयर इज अ मिसमैच ऑफ पावर डिमांड सप्लाई. Maybe because India did not invest enough in power, or globally we did not invest enough in power. रिन्यूएबल की तरफ हमारा फोकस जा रहा है ग्लोबली, और वहां पे जिसको हम बोलते हैं जो आउटपुट होता है, प्लांट लोड फैक्टर होता है, वो कम होता है. तो कैपेसिटी उतनी लगती है मेगावाट के टर्म में, लेकिन आउटपुट थोड़ा कम आता है इनमें. तो क्लियरली गैप है, और ये थीम में विजिबिलिटी बनी रहेगी मेरे हिसाब से. So, and as I said, there are 3 or 4 different ways you can play that. This is one thing which we express ourselves in most of our portfolio. And I think ये लास्ट 1 या 2 साल से चल रही है थी. अगले संवत में भी इसमें अच्छे परिणाम दिखने मिल सकते
But particularly given that the festive demand is on full swing,
हैं. हाँ जी.
apart from power and renewable sector that we talked about, do you see consumption-driven sectors like FMCG, auto gaining momentum?
देखिए, एफएमसीजी में कुछ स्ट्रक्चरल इश्यूज हैं. बेसिकली कंपटीशन, कंपेटिटिव इंटेंसिटी नए प्लेटफॉर्म या चैनल से वहां बढ़ रहे हैं. पेनिट्रेशन लेवल ऑलरेडी हाई है, वैल्यूएशन इतने कंफर्टेबल कभी भी नहीं रहते, तो वहां बड़ा पैसा बनने की उम्मीद कम है. बट हैविंग सेड दैट, आई एम ऑफ द बिलीव, बिकॉज हम एक अगले पूरे एक संवत की बात कर रहे हैं, वन नीड्स टू बी सिलेक्टिव इन कंजम्पशन फॉर श्योर. इवन विद इन say autos, there will be a period where they become attractive, and consumption is a very large space, right? So within that, you can pick and choose subsectors like maybe diagnostic, hospital. They are also consumption proxies, which is where our overweights are. So I think, ब्रॉड टर्म अगर हम देखें, 3 ही चीजें होती हैं इन्वेस्टर्स के पास. केपेक्स होता है, कंजम्पशन ओरिएंटेड स्टॉक्स होते हैं, और एक्सपोर्ट ओरिएंटेड. पैनल ने यहाँ डिस्कस किया कि कंजम्पशन में बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है. एक्सपोर्ट में भी कोई इजी सॉल्यूशंस नहीं है, बट एट द सेम टाइम में ध्यान रखना होगा, स्टिमुलस ग्लोबली लोकल के कंपनीज में ज्यादा आ रहा है. तो एट अ पर्सनल लेवल, एट हाउस लेवल, टेक एक ऐसा सेक्टर है जहां जिसने 2-3 साल से अच्छा परफॉर्म नहीं किया. आईटी एज अ होल सेक्टर. मुझे लगता है कि इसमें गिवन रिलेटिवली अर्निंग का रेजिलियंस ज्यादा रहेगा, तो अपार्ट फ्रॉम पावर विद इन केपेक्स ओरिएंटेड सेक्टर और सिलेक्ट कंज्यूमर सेक्टर, आईटी सेक्टर को भी देखा जा सकता है. अगेन, अगले संवत में ऑब्वियसली मेरा एक ब्रॉड मानना है कि रिटर्न एक्सपेक्टेशंस हमारी कम होनी चाहिए. पिछला संवत बहुत अच्छा गया, उसके 2-3 संवत अच्छे गए, तो उसमें कोई बुराई नहीं है कि अगर रिटर्न एक्सपेक्टेशन कम करें. और 1 साल के व्यू में आई थिंक लॉट ऑफ थिंग कैन चेंज इन अ ईयर. ये परसेप्शन भी बहुत फास्ट चेंज हो जाते हैं. तो आई थिंक ये बड़ा घबराने वाला माहौल नहीं है. बुल मार्केट करेक्शन है, मे बी वी आर नॉट यूज्ड टू इट, बट देयर आर पॉकेट्स ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटी इन माय माइंड.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Rishi, what about you? If we talk about because in India, festive demands and consumption is too big a market. So what do you feel? Do you feel auto retail and these segments will gain momentum, or you feel that there are other sectors which might see the uptick?
Yeah, so I sort of tend to agree with what the other panelists have said. Somehow, in the near term, despite all the festivities, etc., the consumption sectors don't look, too exciting. And in fact, from the quant side, we do have a sector rotation model, which which has done very well for us in the past. And of course, that gives you more like 3 to 6 month views, and it'll keep rotating every quarter, every 6 months. But interestingly, Ashutosh talked about the IT sector. That IT sector signal on our sector rotation model came end of May when no one was really looking at it, and it's done really well so far. And the surprising thing is that it continues to show relatively positive signals compared to all the other sectors. So there is definitely something there that is happening. Obviously, they are more the experts on the fundamental side. They could add, what can be interesting there compared to whatever seasonality is there also in that sector. But that is definitely looking very interesting. On the financial side, there is a good divergence that is happening. Some insurance companies, some private banks are looking much more interesting for the next 6 to 12 months compared to, let's say, PSU banks and some other pockets that have done well in the last 1 or 2 years. So there is an interesting divergence there, which I think can be well played out over the next 6 to 12 months. And then on the metals side, so metals, we are all used to it being a cyclical sector, right? And it's again done very well in different pockets of time in the last 3, 4 years. But something interesting is happening there from a quant perspective. It seems to have become like a secular thing, at least in the near next 1 or 2 or 3 years, which is very interesting and very different. And you're seeing the resilience, right? Even in this month's fall, a lot of the high quality metal names have not really fallen much, and some have been flat to positive as well. There's something definitely cooking there. And of course, it is, some of the companies, there is some correlation to some of the global commodities, depending on the sectors in which they are in. And what is very interesting is that some of the largest commodity indices have broken out to 15-year highs. So that is also very interesting. So both on the physical commodity side as well as some of these metal companies, I think there are lots of pockets of opportunities as well. So those are the three segments, IT, financial, selective, life insurance, some selective NBFCs and private banks, and then the metals. These are the three segments which are looking very interesting from a 6 to 12 month perspective.
Thank you. Rohit, in the last 2, 3 years, many stocks have become multifold, despite higher valuations and not so good earnings. Do you think the same will be in place in coming years as well, or what kind of correction can we expect?
Well, the one word answer for that is no. So in my opinion, the market has now turned to a stock pickers market where the narratives which were driving the stock prices up have now started to get punctured, and people are now tracking earnings, whether those earnings are matching the narratives or not, or the other way around, right? So India is always and will always remain a good narratives market. It will always be forward looking, where the expectations from India will always be high. As and when expectations are met, those sectors will do well. But will all the sectors which you just said that will they continue to do well where earnings have not come? No. If you actually see in this correction, the sectors which have corrected the most, and again, I come back to the same point, it's eventually earnings. Markets are a slave to earnings. The earnings which are not coming in the sectors, they have seen deeper cuts. If you see the average, the biggest declines are in railway stocks and defense stocks. Okay.
Right.
Now you map those with the returns and the earnings that they have generated. I'm not saying the whole sector is untouchable. Now it is time to be a stock picker where the companies which have good earnings growth, cash flows, and visibility will continue to do well. And after some correction, will stabilize and actually start going up versus another company or companies in the same sector which will see going down. In the last few years, what was happening was if the sector was in favor, everything in that sector was going up. And as you rightly said, irrespective of earnings, the stocks were going up. Now that phase is gone. Now is the tougher phase where your earnings estimates are getting lowered. There is selling from whichever center you want, and there will be difference between chalk and cheese. So you will differentiate as to which is a good company and bad company. So I think the easy money making days are over. We should lower our expectations of returns from the market to mid-teen types over a 3 to 5 year horizon, and Obviously, within those, there will be pockets which will do better and pockets which will do worse.
Definitely, we should lower our expectations, especially the way last couple of years have panned out. Cautiously optimistic is how we are supposed to be as investors as we move forward. With that, Asutosh, I would like to ask you large cap results. So this earnings season, your large cap companies' results by far have not been so good. So what's your take on that? Because I think this year, particularly, the theory was that mid and small caps are trading at a higher valuation than their average PE, and large caps were fairly valued. But now with the earnings season, what's your take on that?
देखिए, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल ये प्रॉफिट पूल है स्मॉल कैप, मिड कैप, लार्ज कैप के, ये इतने सिमिलर नहीं है अभी जितने 10-15 साल पहले रहते थे। तो हम ये बोल सकते थे कि अगर सिमिलर प्रॉफिट पूल में एक साइज कैटेगरी में पैसा ज्यादा बन गया है तो दूसरी कैटेगरी अट्रैक्टिव हो जाती है। ये बड़े डिफरेंट इंडाइसेस हैं टू माय माइंड। डेफिनेटली हमको देख के लगता है कि लार्ज कैप सस्ते हैं रिलेटेड टू हिस्ट्री एज कम्पेयर टू मिड एंड स्मॉल कैप। बट उसका रीजन है, जैसे रोहित बार बार बात कर रहे हैं अर्निंग्स की, इनमें अर्निंग नहीं आई है और अर्निंग अभी भी नहीं आ रही है। लार्ज कैप में अगर आप देखें, बैंक्स हैं, एफएमसीजी कंपनीज हैं, लार्ज ऑयल एंड गैस कंपनी है, टेलीकॉम है, और उसके अलावा आईटी सेक्टर, ये कुछ मिला के 2/3 ऑफ दी लार्ज कैप वुड बी दीज कंपनीज। फॉर वेराइटी ऑफ रीजन इनमें अर्निंग नहीं आ रही। एट द सेम टाइम अगर आप मिड एंड स्मॉल कैप का जो प्रॉफिट पूल देखें, रोहित भी बात कर रहे थे कि जो इमर्जिंग प्रॉफिट पूल्स हैं वो है नहीं लार्ज कैप्स में। अगर आपको प्रॉफिट पूल्स में पार्टिसिपेट करना है तो आपको मिड एंड स्मॉल कैप में ही उनकी अपॉर्चुनिटी मिल रही है। तो मुझे लगता है ये जो डिबेट है लार्ज, मिड एंड स्मॉल की, आई थिंक मे बी 4-5-6 साल बाद ये सब डिबेट लोग कर भी नहीं रही होंगी। डेफिनेटली पॉकेट्स ऑफ very attractive risk reward generally are limited in the market at this point of time. But to my mind, अर्निंग डिस्पर्शन के पर्सपेक्टिव से अगर हम देखें तो मुझे नहीं लगता कि लार्ज कैप की अर्निंग एज एन इंडेक्स स्मॉल एंड मिड कैप की अर्निंग से बेहतर होंगी अगले 12-18 महीने में। अगर ये मेरा व्यू है, मुझे नहीं लगता कि स्मॉल एंड मिड कैप में कुछ बहुत ज्यादा करेक्शन आना चाहिए वर्सेस लार्ज कैप, बिकॉज टिपिकली जो बड़े करेक्शंस आते हैं स्मॉल मिड कैप में, उनमें एक बेस कारण रहता है उनका अर्निंग का ज्यादा गिरना वर्सेस लार्ज कैप। वैसा मुझे होते हुए नहीं दिख रहा है क्योंकि ये प्रॉफिट पूल ज्यादा है।
And Rishi, so moving on from our domestic markets will get impacted, do get impacted with the international issues. So how do you expect ongoing geopolitical tensions and global macroeconomic factors such as crude oil prices, your US interest rates, which have been now started for a cut, and then US elections to influence Indian markets?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been a very mixed pocket there, and direct correlations have not in the recent past been completely being upheld. So you're seeing yields moving around, first they fell, now they're rising. You're seeing the dollar index going up over the last few weeks, but markets are still strong in the US, which is not always the case. So I think all of this dichotomy is happening because sort of there is confusion between the sentiment versus the price action versus the earnings. So what we are discussing for India, not only here, but even globally in certain pockets. So because of that confusion, these things are all over the place. There's no direct correlation, but obviously over time that will get settled down, right? So that is going to happen. But for now, what is happening is that obviously US has been like the strongest market, right? So इस महीने हमारी markets गिरी हैं, लेकिन US markets are still at highs. So I think that also is sort of approaching resistances. So even if I look at the US markets now, they're hitting certain key resistances from a technical perspective. And given the fact that we are being strong into the election period, there is a decent chance that over the next few weeks, the US markets also soften a little bit or get a bit more volatile, etc. So that can be very interesting. And then on the other factors, of course, because of the geopolitics, crude has been volatile. It went up in between, it went up recently, but it's not really giving any clear trend overall. So no clear picture is emerging from there. as such. And then, as I was saying earlier, on the commodity side, of course, there's a big breakout, and there are lots of large moves happening on various commodities. Even locally, like, gold and silver have been on a tear. Silver is actually giving very, very strong signals, even in the next 3 to 6 months. I think it can go up another 15-20%. It's up 30-40% in the last 6 months, which has been very surprising for people. But that's sort of another asset allocation thing that people can use even domestically, given that there are silver ETFs and silver futures and other things now. Going back to the global side, yes, so that geopolitical stuff, overall macro, interest rates getting cut, but future path not being very clear, the probabilities changing of what can happen in the next few, rate meetings of the Fed. Locally also, people were in between the expectations that December rate cut would be there had increased, but now it is again sort of declined with inflation sort of increasing, and the other factors that the panelists have been talking about. So I think it is very mixed, and overall, even globally, there is a case that there should be a halt at least to the one-way move that the markets have been seeing even in countries like US and UK. So that is the larger view that is forming here in the near term.
Rohit, what is your point of view about how these factors can influence the Indian markets and how Indian market should, what are your also expectations on the rate cut, RBI rate cut? So,
Yeah, okay. Well, of course, US elections do have at least a short-term to medium-term impact on Indian markets as well. And the first question where you had asked about money moving to China, if you actually look at the data, money is moving to the US, right? Where there is expectation that a certain one of the two will win, and that will be more favorable to the policies or the economic policy or the well-being of that country itself. If tariffs are raised, yeah, there's inflation, yeah, so that country, they are seeing some money moving in. Obviously, some of it is in anticipation of who they believe will win the election. If I were to take a call, if the odds which are currently going to the market of Mr. Trump being a likely winner, it is actually a good thing for India from a medium to long-term perspective. Now, I have a very different take on this, and I wear a very different hat, adorn a very different hat when it comes to that. The logic that I use is that what I believe is that gentleman is a businessman, where most probably the geopolitical situation will likely, I think it's probability, will ease off versus what you see today. Yeah, simply because the approach I believe personally, it's a personal view, please don't take it otherwise. मेरा ऐसा मानना है कि उनका ये व्यू होता है कि मैं जाता हूँ, सामने बैठता हूँ, कुछ ऐसा करते हैं कि आप बोलो कि आप जीत गए, सामने वाला बोले कि वो भी जीत गया, दोनों खुश, दोनों की कंट्रीज खुश, और US still remains the best country in the world. And he gets a solution. That's because maybe उनका अप्रोच एक बिजनेसमैन की तरह है. साथ साथ में इंडिया के लिए क्या फायदेमंद हो सकता है कि इंडिया की जो दो नेबर्स हैं जिनसे हमारी बीच बीच में अनबन होती रहती है, चाइना एंड पाकिस्तान, इन डिफरेंट वेज, ठीक है, उन दोनों में भी उनका रवैया एक ही है कि हम टॉलरेट नहीं करेंगे एक तो चाइना से बड़े इंपोर्ट्स, जो कि इंडिया के लिए चाइना +1 के लिए फेवर करता है, एंड ऑब्वियसली पाकिस्तान से टेररिज्म. So if I look at it for India as a whole, for most policies, give or take a few, overall India stands to benefit if Mr. Trump comes back now as the president. But in the interim, India will follow its own little path on macroeconomics, where जहां पे अभी थोड़ी सी इन्फ्लेशन हाई आई है, तो ये बहुत इसके पहले आवाज हो रही थी कि आरबीआई रेट क्यों नहीं काट रहा है, एंड लोग तो लास्ट पॉलिसी में भी एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे थे कि रेट कट हो. लेकिन मेरे हिसाब से रेट कट नहीं देखना चाहिए, आपको देखना चाहिए सिस्टम में मनी फ्लो क्या है. ठीक है, तो अगर आप देखेंगे आरबीआई द सिस्टम एज अ होल जो कि डेफिसिट में था, अब वो डेफिसिट में नहीं है, सरप्लस में आ गया है. तो रेट कट इज जस्ट वन नंबर, बट अल्टीमेटली बैंक्स के लिए जो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट चीज होती है कि वो सिस्टम में लिक्विडिटी है कि डेफिसिट है कि सरप्लस है. तो वो आरबीआई मैनेज कर रहा है. एंड अगर जब यूएस में रेट हाइक्स भी हो रहे थे तो इंडिया उनको फॉलो नहीं कर रहा था, बिकॉज इंडिया की इन्फ्लेशन एक ऐसे लेवल पे थी जहां हमें रेट हाइक्स की जरूरत नहीं थी। आज के दिन यूएस की इन्फ्लेशन इंडिया से नीचे आ गई है, जो कि यूएस में ऊपर चली गई थी, लेकिन इंडिया की इन्फ्लेशन इतनी नीचे नहीं आई है। तो इंडिया में रेट कट्स अगर होंगे भी तो कैलिब्रेटेड होंगे, और मेरे हिसाब से द रेट कट साइकिल इन इंडिया विल बी अ शैलो रेट कट साइकिल वर्सेस अ डीप रेट कट साइकिल दैट सम पीपल माइट एक्सपेक्ट। एक डीप रेट कट साइकिल तभी आएगा इंडिया में जब ग्लोबली कोई इकोनॉमिक शॉक आएगा, एंड देन वी विल नीड स्ट्रॉन्गर रेट कट। अदरवाइज मेरे एक्सपेक्टेशन में देयर विल बी अ शैलो रेट कट साइकिल। मनी विल बी अवेलेबल, इट विल नॉट बी अवेलेबल वेरी चीप, बट बैंकिंग को जो लिक्विडिटी चाहिए होती है वो आरबीआई ऑलरेडी प्रोवाइड कर रहा है। लेकिन साथ साथ में अगर आप देखें तो वो सारे सेगमेंट्स जहां आरबीआई को लगता है कि तकलीफ है, जैसे कि मैंने पहले भी कहा, एमएफआई, अनसिक्योर्ड क्रेडिट कार्ड, वहां पे वो रूल्स को टाइटन भी कर रहा है। तो वो ये नहीं चाहता है कि सिस्टम में लिक्विडिटी चोक हो जाए और लोगों को क्रेडिट ना मिले, लेकिन वो चाहता है कि वो सेगमेंट जहां पे प्रॉब्लम है या प्रॉब्लम आ रही है उसमें पैसा कम जाए। तो आई थिंक आरबीआई इज डूइंग अ वेरी वेरी गुड जॉब, yeah, to manage the whole expectation of rate cut, liquidity and credit, and I think that will continue. But अगर rate cut की सिर्फ बात करें तो I don't think headline rate cuts will be very sharp, that they will be shallow, in my opinion.
Makes sense, Rohit. Thanks for that. Also, listeners, please put in your questions in the Q&A section, which if you have any questions, which we can take up towards the end of the session. So, Ashutosh, moving on from the US-based actions to something that China had done recently, with China loosening some of its monetary policies and showing signs of recovery. How can this impact India in terms of competitive sectors and FII flows and investor confidence?
ये डिपेंड करता है किस एक्सटेंट तक चाइना फिस्कल और मॉनेटरी स्टिमुलस प्रोवाइड करता है। वहाँ की चैलेंजेस बड़े हैं। वहाँ एक बड़ा एसेट डिफ्लेशन था रियल एस्टेट इक्विटी मार्केट में, कॉन्फिडेंस लेवल वहाँ पे लोगों का कम है। वो ग्रोथ के नंबर में, अर्निंग के नंबर में दिखा है। सो टू व्हाट एक्सटेंट चाइनीज पॉलिसी मेकर्स वुड kind of respond to the slowdown, and they have already raised the expectation bar higher. इसमें ये हमें जरूर देखना होगा कि चाइना की स्टिमुलस देने की जो कैपेबिलिटी है वो काफी कुछ डिपेंड करती है यूएस डॉलर के मूवमेंट। अगर यूएस डॉलर किसी भी कारण से वहां रेट कट्स कम होती हैं, इंटरेस्ट रेट ऊपर बने रहते हैं, जैसा कि 10 ईयर जीसेक रेट वहां पे 4% के ऊपर चले गए, तो अगर रिसेशन नहीं आया, रेट कट थोड़े से कम हुए, या किसी भी कारण से इंटरेस्ट रेट बॉन्ड मार्केट में प्रेशर बना रहा, इंटरेस्ट रेट ऊपर रह गए और उस वजह से डॉलर स्ट्रांग रह गया किसी भी कारण से, पॉलिटिकल और इकोनॉमिक, तो मुझे लगता है कि चाइना की जो एबिलिटी है टू स्टिमुलेट देयर ओन इकोनॉमी वो थोड़ी सी कंटेन हो जाती है। तो ये हमें देखना होगा। यहाँ से डॉलर एक मेरे हिसाब से एक इन्फ्लेक्शन पॉइंट पे है। बहुत न्यूट्रलिश पॉइंट है। यहाँ से अगर वो पोस्ट इलेक्शन अगर डॉलर में थोड़ी सी वीकनेस आती है, रेट कट्स वगैरह होते हैं, इवेंट रिस्क खत्म हो जाती है, मुझे लगता है एक राउंड ऑफ स्टिमुलस चाइना में और होगा। मुझे नहीं लगता वहां बड़ी ग्रोथ रिकवरी आएगी, बट डेफिनेटली वहां के वैल्यूएशन इतने सस्ते हो रखे हैं कि एक जो सेगमेंट है ग्लोबल इन्वेस्टर्स का, एवरी टाइम जब वहां पे कुछ स्टिमुलस आता है दे गेट अट्रैक्टिव फ्रॉम अ टेक्निकल पर्सपेक्टिव, कि चाइना के जो वैल्यूएशंस हैं उनको ध्यान में रखते हुए 3-6 महीने के लिए ट्रेड कर ली जाए। बट बियॉन्ड द पॉइंट आई डोंट थिंक कुछ एक बड़ा वरीसम कुछ इवेंट होगा इंडिया के पर्सपेक्टिव से, जो बड़ा जो पैसे का जो शिफ्ट है, फ्लोस का जो शिफ्ट है, ब्रॉडली आई थिंक इट शुड हैव बीन डन। जिस हिसाब से इंडिया से आउटफ्लो हुआ है, जिस हिसाब से इंडिया ऑलरेडी एक अंडर वेट मार्केट था, मुझे नहीं लगता कि चाइना के स्टिमुलस देने से ये कंटिन्यू होगा। at the end of the day, fundamentals will prevail. If, as some of the panelists are saying, अगर अर्निंग में ज्यादा गिरावट आती है इंडिया में, तो ये आउटफ्लो कंटिन्यू हो सकते हैं। और इफ वी थिंक दैट 15% की जगह 10-12% पे अगर अर्निंग सेटल होती है इंडिया में, तो आई थिंक देन वर्स्ट ऑफ दोज फियर्स और जो आउटफ्लोज हैं वो अगले कुछ दिनों में और कुछ हफ्तों में मेरे को लगता है खत्म हो जाएंगी। तो China is important from global demand perspective, global geopolitical and other perspective, but from our market perspective, उसकी importance I think ये थोड़ी exaggerated है to my mind.
That's a different view altogether. That's interesting, Ashutosh. Moving on to SEBI and RBI and their active involvement in the current markets. As Rohit, you have discussed RBI's active involvement that we have seen in the couple of actions that the body has taken. Similarly, there have been certain changes and declarations which have been done by SEBI. I would like to know from you, Rishi, what would be the impact of these recent changes brought in by SEBI, and how will they affect the market participation?
So you're talking about the changes on the derivatives market
Yes.
or other
Yeah,
things
the
as well?
derivative market as well as the other
Mainly.
things.
Okay, yeah. So first, I'll talk about the derivatives a little more detail, but first, even the earlier circular, right, where a lot of the stocks which can be used for pledging have basically been taken away, right? So that has been something very interesting, and in some pockets of the mid cap, small cap stock declines that you're seeing over the last 1 or 2 months, that has actually been a reason, although a little bit under the radar and not being tracked by everybody, right? So, as per a recent SEBI circular, basically 1,010 stocks, mostly from the small and mid cap category, were taken off the list of collaterals, right? That are accepted as margin pledges, both for derivatives trading as well as if you want to take a loan against shares from banks or NBFCs. And it was done in phases. So there were total of 1730 stocks or whatever, if I remember correctly. Out of that, 1,010 were taken away. So that's a large percentage, right? So that's like 60-70% of the stocks being taken away. And it was in phases where I think 40% or 50% could, you would still get the margin benefit till October. But from November, actually, it is basically zero for all those stocks, right? So that has had an impact, and like I said, not fully tracked and noticed by the market, because basically, people use these stocks for this kind of lending or pledging for the derivative trades, and then if that is not there, then the relative attractiveness of some of those stocks can go away. If I'm sort of indifferent between two stocks and one can be used as pledge for margining or for loan against shares, then I would exit that and buy the one that I can use for those reasons. So that, while it looks small, if it is done across so many number of stocks and by a large number of people, then it obviously has an impact on those particular stocks. So a lot of the stocks from that segment have therefore got impacted, which is a very interesting thing on one side. Then coming to further regulatory changes by SEBI on the derivative side, of course, we'll see some of that impact from next month, because largely those changes are happening from November. Obviously, the immediate things that have already happened from October are on the transaction charges, right?
Yeah.
So the STT has gone up and some other transaction charges changes have happened. So on the margin, what that does is for the futures trades and for the very fast churn derivative trades, it increases your cost and thereby decreases your returns in a very simple manner. So for a lot of HFT kind of traders, for example, these transaction charges increasing will have an impact on reduction of profitability, and therefore their volumes and their action to that extent could be a little dampened because of this from an immediate perspective. In November, what is happening is that a lot of the weekly options are going away on a lot of the indices, क्योंकि सेबी ने बोला था कि हर exchange का NSE है या BSE है, both can have only one weekly expiry. So NSE has gone ahead with uh, NSE has gone ahead with Nifty and BSE has gone ahead with Sensex. So what that means is Bank Nifty index, जिसका actually largest volumes था market में, Bank Nifty is no longer there on NSE, and even BankX, जो लोगों को लगा था कि Bank Nifty अगर NSE से जाएगा तो BankX BSE पे रहेगा और वो volumes वहां shift हो जाएंगी. लेकिन for some reason, because of SEBI's concern and exchanges largely being aligned with SEBI in some of those views, they have gone ahead and kept their main indices, Nifty and Sensex. So banking, whether it was Bank Nifty or BankX, nahi rahega post mid-November. And therefore, a large part of the volumes, because banking was almost 50-60% of the derivative market volumes, is going to go away. So that is a big concern from a liquidity perspective on the derivative side. लेकिन हमने ऐसे episodes past में देखे हैं. Obviously this is not very frequent, but go back all the way to 2004 when सबसे पहली बार STT introduce हुआ था derivatives market, right? And तब सबका मानना था कि volumes will crash, markets will crash, but ऐसा कुछ हुआ नहीं. Because anyone who's involved in the markets, obviously those transaction charges matter more for, like I said, either the HFT firms or local firms also, who are like jobbers kind of people जो fast trading और market making sort of करते हैं markets में. और उनको क्या होता है, एक certain ROI, एक certain earning, even a very small trader doing a lot of active churn is used to a certain earning from the market. Once you're used to that, you increase your volumes to be able to do that. You don't just accept the lower earning just because transaction charges have gone up. So वो volume किसी ना किसी तरह से ना किसी और instrument में basically आ जाता है, is basically been the historical thing that we've seen. So इधर भी मेरा मानना है कि monthly options, जहाँ पे निफ्टी बैंक निफ्टी में post the weekly options introduction, monthly options में liquidity कम हो गई थी over the last 5-6 years. So I think वो liquidity थोड़ी वापस बढ़ जाएगी, which is good, which is actually healthy for the market. Some volumes जो retail या smaller traders actually sort of punt in the markets in some manner, right? That some of that volumes will go into the stock option side, because वहां पे आपकी contract changes, margin changes भी नहीं हो रहे हैं. Like NIF index में आपका contract size बढ़ जाएगा. So a lot of small traders may not be able to trade there. But stock option side में वो नहीं होगा. So I think stock option side में, monthly index option side में volumes थोड़े बढ़ जाएंगे, which is actually healthy overall. But for a lot of players, for a lot of prop shops who are used to doing intraday trades and weekly option trades, obviously that activity will go down. I think, whatever I have seen in forums that I am part of, obviously they are also, all these kind of players are also looking at what strategies they can do in the other instruments to sort of retain their edge. So I think it's a 6-month period जहाँ पे definitely थोड़ा volume तो dip होगा. Entire 50-60% volumes will not come in the monthlies and the stocks. But post that, some realignment will happen. Exchanges also are looking at adding more indices. So even if it's only weekly, monthly options, लेकिन और 2-4 indices introduce हो जाते हैं. Let's say IT index comes up, some other, so 1 or 2 sectoral indices and 1 or 2 other larger indices, and maybe some of the mid cap index or other things also, the option volumes may go up. So that in the long run will be healthy, and post 6 months, I think we'll be back to reasonable volumes. Some small dip may happen as a result of these changes. But interim में next 2-3 महीने में कुछ impact आ सकता है, so that remains to be seen and remains a question mark.
Okay. Ashutosh, your view on the same?
Yeah, so honestly, there were signs of excesses. ये हमें सबको पता है. And what RBI is trying to do is to, avoid any bigger accidents. Sorry, the CB is trying to do is to avoid any bigger accident. So we should see all of these things in that context, that, for a healthy market, from a longer term healthy market, some of these excesses have to be controlled. तो मुझे लगता है कि शॉर्ट टर्म में हमें ये सब इवेंट से लगता है डिसरप्शन हो रहा है, कंफ्यूजन बढ़ रहा है, थोड़ा कॉन्फिडेंस में हिट हो रहा है. बट आई थिंक जो हमारी जो पूरी बड़ी थीम है, फाइनेंशियलाइजेशन ऑफ सेविंग्स एंड लॉन्गर टर्म वैल्यू क्रिएशन पर्सपेक्टिव से, आई थिंक ये ज्यादातर ये जो स्टेप्स लिए हैं रेगुलेटर ने अभी तक, वो एक एंड इन्वेस्टर, एक स्मॉल इन्वेस्टर के पर्सपेक्टिव से, ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स आर एक्चुअली वेरी वेरी गुड. एंड आई थिंक regulator only respond when they see excesses build up. Otherwise, we should all take more and more confidence that, it is the best regulated market, and बड़े accidents की गुंजाइश यहाँ पे पहले भी कम थी, और मुझे लगता है इन steps से और कम हो जाती है. तो we should not look at these steps very critically के regulator investors के against है. I think every step in a bigger picture context is in favor of smaller investors.
Okay. So, with this, I would now like to know one very interesting question pertaining to the current markets at the levels and the levels in which the current markets are. So, looking at these levels now, I would like to know everybody's opinion here that what do you think is for the investors who are there who have probably the liquidity, they are sitting on some liquidity or they are already invested in market. So you think pulling out will be the right behavior for an investor, or staying invested would be the right behavior, or probably reinvesting in equities will be the right behavior? Let's start with you, Rohit.
Yeah, sure. So I think the India story from medium to long term remains very good.
Hmm.
It remains sound. The only recalibration that investors need to make is that expectation of returns should not be very high. What tends to happen is we always tend to be very pro-cyclical and tend to be driven by recency bias. The recency bias is that the markets have given handsome returns in the last 4 years. It's not that the markets are likely to give negative returns in the next 5 years, but your expectation of returns, as I said, should be more closer to mid-teens for over a thin block of next 5 years, which itself is a very good return, right? Now we have to again understand that returns happen because earnings come, right? Over last 30 years, Nifty ka earning is 11% or so. Market return of Nifty is 13-14% or so. Over the last 20 odd years, the return of mid cap index earnings is 14-13-14%. The return of the index is 15-16-17%. Right? So mid caps tend to do better. I am also touching on that point. Not again because they are mid cap, because the earning growth of that index has been higher than Nifty over a longest period of time. As long as you believe that will continue, mid caps will have its own space as well. And there will be pockets of exuberance which will die down. But if you make the right call, you will make money. Right? So if investors are sitting on cash, I think from now on to maybe March, it should be a very good time to keep accumulating. Let's not forget, even if markets remain flat for 3 months or 4 months and did not go down, you would have effectively corrected by 2 to 3% simply because you are expecting, हमारी expectation क्या है कि earning growth निफ्टी की 12% के आसपास होगी. तो अगर एक क्वार्टर बाजार कहीं नहीं गया तो आप 3% से ऑलरेडी सस्ते हो गए, राइट? तो अगर 3% आप सस्ते हो गए या 1-2% और गिर गया तो 5-7% का और करेक्शन आ गया अगर, देन इंडिया एक हेल्दी हो जाएगा मार्केट. एंड एक आपका जो पुराना इसके पहले सवाल था रेगुलेटर को लेके, उससे क्या हो रहा है ना, सिस्टम में जो लेवरेज है ना वो बहुत कम हो जा रही है. तो जो लेवरेज है इंडिविजुअल एचएनआई का या रिटेल पे, जो कि वो स्टॉक्स को अब कैनॉट बी गिवन एज कोलैटरल, राइट? एसएमई में जो उन्होंने किया है कि अब 90% से ज्यादा पे लिस्ट नहीं हो सकता, एसएमई में भी एएसएम भी आ गया. तो ये सब जो रिटेल फ्रेंडली मेजर्स है ना, उससे बाजार का जो फ्रॉथ है या सिस्टम में जो लेवरेज है वो अब कम हो गया है. वो थोड़ा सा और गिर सकता है क्या? ऑफ कोर्स गिर सकता है, लेकिन वो अब अपने फैग एंड के आसपास है, ऐसा हमें लगता है इन टर्म्स ऑफ लेवरेज. तो जब सिस्टम से लेवरेज निकल जाता है ना, तब अच्छी कंपनियां और मार्केट दोनों gets ready for the next run. Again, it is just a correction in the long run bull market, which will happen. And let's not forget, corrections in bull markets are always very sharp, right? तो इसलिए हम अभी डरे हुए हैं. लेकिन अगर आप थोड़ा सा पीछे हट के देखोगे, इसी चीज को 5 साल के बाद देखोगे, तो आपको लगेगा कि अरे वो तो 10% का एक करेक्शन आया था. तो इंडिया में बुल मार्केट इंटैक्ट है, इंडिया की इकोनॉमी अच्छी कर रही है, देश अपना अच्छा कर रहा है. हमें अपने रिटर्न एक्सपेक्टेशन को थोड़ी टेम्पर करनी है. मिड टीन रिटर्न्स बनेंगे यहां से लेके, आई थिंक इन द नेक्स्ट 3 to 6 months. वॉलिटिलिटी का यूज करिए एंड लोड अप ऑन इक्विटी इज व्हाट आई वुड से.
Take your tactical calls as and when you see market opportunities. Absolutely right. Rohit, Ashutosh, what will be your point of view and suggestions to the investors?
सिमिलर टू रोहित, बहुत क्लीशेड होता है बोलना कि सिस्टमैटिकली इन्वेस्ट करें. तो क्या होता है ये वॉलेटिलिटी में आप निकल जाएं, अगर आप मार्केट टाइम भी कर सकते हैं, आपको 2 बार टाइम करना पड़ता है. आपको राइट टाइम पे वापस भी आना है. आई थिंक दोनों चीजें होने के लिए यू नीड टू बी एक्सट्रीमली लकी ऑल्सो, एक्सट्रीमली स्मार्ट, एक्सट्रीमली लकी. हमें ये अटेम्प्ट नहीं करना चाहिए मेरे हिसाब से. तो मेरे हिसाब से कंप्लीटली कंकर विथ रोहित. के बने रहें, रिटर्न एक्सपेक्टेशन कम करके सिस्टमेटिकली इन्वेस्ट करें. बट अगर आपका असेट लोकेशन बहुत ही ज्यादा स्क्यू है इन टर्म्स ऑफ इक्विटी, आई थिंक जब रिटर्न एक्सपेक्टेशन आपकी जैसे ग्लोबल इक्विटीज में या गोल्ड में या इवन फिक्स्ड इनकम में इक्विटी से बहुत ज्यादा डिफरेंट अगर रिटर्न्स नहीं आने वाले, अगर हम ये सब मान के चलते हैं, तो आई थिंक ये जो एसेट लोकेशन फंड्स होते हैं, ये भी एक खराब ऑप्शन नहीं है. अच्छी चीज क्या होती है इनमें कि आपकी जो हैंड होल्डिंग होती है, जो इक्विटी के साथ जो उतार चढ़ाव आते हैं, उसकी जो घबराहट है वो कम हो जाती है. तो या हम एज एन एडवाइजर हम लोगों को सजेस्ट करें कि आप एज एन इन्वेस्टर अपने एसेट लोकेशन पे ध्यान दें. बहुत ज्यादा इक्विटी में तो नहीं है, बहुत ज्यादा छोटे स्टॉक में, हाई रिस्क सिक्लिकल सेगमेंट्स में, थेमेटिक सेगमेंट्स में तो नहीं है. अगर वैसा है तो मेरी सलाह रहेगी इस समय डेफिनेटली थोड़ा सा डाइवर्सिफिकेशन पे फोकस करें. और मुझे लगता है 1 2 3 साल के पर्सपेक्टिव से एक अच्छे एसेट लोकेशन फंड का ब्रॉडर मार्केट से रिटर्न डिफरेंस बहुत ज्यादा नहीं होना चाहिए, क्योंकि ऑलरेडी ब्रॉडर मार्केट ने बहुत अच्छा परफॉर्मेंस हमें दे दिया है.
ओके, थैंक यू आशुतोष. ऋषि, आपको क्या लगता है, when it comes to your suggestion how to ride these kind of volatilities, what will be your choice?
हाँ, सो अभी ये क्लियर है कि ऑल्दो अर्निंग्स के बेसिस पे आशुतोष ने भी बताया कि लार्ज कैप्स, मिड कैप, स्मॉल कैप, ज्यादा डिस्पर्जन नहीं है, इट्स सॉर्ट ऑफ सिमिलर ऑन बोथ साइड. सो आई एग्री विद दैट. हैविंग सेड दैट, द जो मिड कैप का पी है और लार्ज कैप को, उसका उसमें थोड़ा सा वो बहुत ही ओवर एक्सटेंडेड था. वो हल्का सा करेक्ट हुआ है, बट इट्स स्टिल ऑन द हायर साइड. So I would say from an immediate perspective and given volatility, right? Like I think all in their own ways have said that next 3 to 6 months, thoda volatility रह सकता है, markets will be difficult, etc. So I have the same view as I said in the beginning. So given that, I think in that kind of a phase, like I mentioned, October 21 to March 23, वैसे periods में basically you are anyway better off being in large caps and selective on the other mid to small caps based on stock selection. So I would go with that. I would have a large cap allocation, selectively keep dipping into the smaller stocks as and when you get an opportunity and take advantage of the volatility. जब जब वो गिरे कुछ अच्छे stocks तो जो fundamentally strong हैं तो आप accumulate कर लीजिए. So that would be my template, and I think there will be multiple, potentially 5-10% moves up and down over the next few months without markets really going anywhere. तो उसका advantage आप थोड़ा उस तरह से ले सकते हैं. And the other thing I agree with Ashutosh that, some sort of asset allocation. I mean, we all know globally also, of course, when stocks give you great returns, it's great, जैसे रोहित ने कहा. लेकिन overall in a very long term scenario, asset allocation अगर आपका अच्छा है तो उससे better आपका returns नहीं आ सकता है with limiting the risk. So at the same time, I mentioned about silver, in an earlier question. So I think some of those things are available to investors, whether they put it in a good asset allocation mutual fund or they sort of do some of it at a very basic level themselves. वो opportunity है. I think gold has really done very well and overextended, but silver में move थोड़ा बचा हुआ है, तो I would definitely advocate strongly कि उसको लोग देख सकते हैं. And then there will be cycles of pockets where even that will go up and down. So mix large cap, a core allocation with selectively picking some of the mid and small caps, tactically, move around on some of the commodities like silver also. And I think that can be a good combination for the next 6 months.
Thank you, Rishi. So I guess if we conclude the discussion that we had today, आज के इन्वेस्टर को अपने एसेट एलोकेशन से स्टिक रहने की जरूरत है. टैक्टिकली उन सेक्टर्स में मूव करने की जरूरत है इन द अपकमिंग 6 to 8 months, जहां पर टैक्टिकल बिल्डअप इन कमोडिटीज और द सेक्टर्स दैट वी हैव डिस्कस्ड दैट कुड बी द फ्लेवर ऑफ Samvat 2081. Interesting. Thank you. And with that, we will quickly have a look at the Q&A section. Please pour in any questions if you have. So I would just go ahead with the first question that Manish has posted, that what will be the effect of BRICS multi-currency system against the US dollar on equity markets worldwide? So Rishi, if you can throw some light, probably Rohit can add on to it.
Yeah, I think that is sort of been a trend in the last few years where all the other large economies in the world, Russia, China clearly have stated that. India has also been trying by trying to have some trade in INR terms itself. Some select pockets of countries have sort of accepted it, some have not, but at least वो trend start तो हो गया है, right? From an Indian perspective also. And China, Russia have been trying to do that with the Middle East and between themselves, etc. also in the past. So I think ये थोड़ा at least Asian side or emerging market side का phenomenon definitely है over the last few years, along with the recent BRICS meeting, to reduce dependency on the US dollar. So I think yes, वो trend और continue ही करेगा. This will magnify over the next few years, given that US also tries to throw its weight around quite a lot, and obviously its clout and everything else is sort of declining compared to, let's say, 5 or 10 years back. And a lot of other countries have grown, and everyone has their own ambitions. So and the geopolitics is obviously there also playing a larger role. So given a mix of all of that, I think ये trend तो continue होने ही वाला है. Coming specifically to how DXY and other things will happen, obviously, I think smaller oscillations will keep happening. But in the longer term, that trend will be there where the other currencies sort of strengthen compared to the dollar. But in the near term, I wouldn't expect that to the same extent, because these are talks that are happening. These will take very long-term periods to sort of flow through. In the near term, I think the dollar will remain important, and its ups and downs will impact markets and other currencies accordingly.
I think it's already some time that we have been discussing about finding an alternative to dollar. Rohit, what is your view on the same?
जी सी डॉलर का ऑल्टरनेटिव आज ही खड़ा करना बहुत आसान नहीं है, राइट? एज ऋषि सेड, most countries have been trying. It started with China, right? India is making its own effort. India is not making an effort. हम ये कोशिश नहीं कर रहे कि हम डॉलर को रिप्लेस करें. हम ये कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि क्या हमारा ट्रेड, जो कि बहुत हद तक अभी डॉलर में होता है, उससे कुछ परसेंटेज कम हो जाए और हमारा रुपया में ट्रेड बढ़ जाए. देखिए, ये सब जो चीज है ना, 1 दशक, 2 दशक, 3 दशक लगेंगे. उसके बाद 3 से 5%, 7% अगर मूव हो गया ना, तो वी आर थ्रू. दैट इज द मैग्नीट्यूड ऑफ दिस थिंग. उसमें हमने वी हैव मेड वेरी गुड प्रोग्रेस, आई थिंक, राइट? अगर आप देखें इंडिया की, जो इतने आप बात कर रहे हैं ना, इतना हमने लोगों ने पैसा बनाया है, मार्केट अच्छा रहा है, उसके वन ऑफ द बिगेस्ट रीजन हैज बीन मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक स्टेबिलिटी, which stems from obviously the forex reserves, and which also is the trade deficit, and then जो flow through होता है आपके करेंसी में. अगर आप आज इंडिया की करेंसी को देखोगे, पहले आप देखोगे जब भी एपिसोड्स हुए हैं तो इंडिया की करेंसी पे रन होता था, बहुत जल्दी डिप्रिशिएट हो जाता था. लेकिन आज के दिन ऐसा नहीं होता, क्योंकि हमारी पॉलिसीज, हमारा इन्फ्लेशन, हमारा फॉरेक्स सब इतना स्टेबल हो गया है पहले से. एंड नाउ दिस मेक इन इंडिया, तो राइट, हम पहले मोबाइल फोन सिर्फ इंपोर्ट करते थे, अब हमारा इंपोर्ट डिपेंडेंस कम हो रहा है. ऑयल जो हम अभी भी ऑब्वियसली इंपोर्ट करते हैं, लेकिन आप समझिए ऑयल की खपत इंडिया में 2, 3, 4% से ज्यादा नहीं है, जबकि हमारी नॉमिनल जीडीपी 12, 14, 15% से ग्रो हो रही है. सो हमारा डिपेंडेंस ऑन ऑयल एज अ परसेंटेज कीप्स गोइंग डाउन. हमारा गोल्ड इज द ओनली बिग कंजम्पशन, जो कि अब हमने एक्सपोर्ट भी करने लगे. तो इंडिया, आज के दिन आप अबू धाबी या दुबई जाओगे तो वहां पे आपका रुपए चलता है, राइट? आप आईएनआर में वहां पे पे कर सकते हो. तो वो धीरे धीरे एक बहुत लॉन्ग डाउन प्रोसेस है. एक ही दिन में सब कुछ, या नेक्स्ट 1 साल या 2 साल में उसका इम्पैक्ट आपको दिखेगा क्या? आंसर इज नो, सिंपली बिकॉज वी हैव टू कीप दिस इन माइंड ऑल्सो, दैट इफ यू टेक अ नेक्स्ट 3 to 5 year व्यू, the country which is economically या अर्निंग वाइज ऑल्सो डूइंग वेल आफ्टर इंडिया इज यूएसए, राइट? तो ऐसा नहीं है कि और बहुत सारी कंट्रीज जो अपनी करेंसी बनाना चाह रही हैं, खाली करेंसी में ट्रेड कैसे होगा? सामने वाला मानना चाहिए ना. आज के दिन समझ लीजिए आप कोई एक्सपोर्ट ट्रेड करना चाह रहे हैं, लेकिन सामने वाला अगर बोलता है मुझे यूएस डॉलर ही चाहिए, तो उसको ये कन्विंस करना कि आप यूएस डॉलर नहीं, मेरी करेंसी लो, उसको आपकी करेंसी और आपकी कंट्री पे वो कॉन्फिडेंस आना चाहिए, राइट? चाइना ने भी कैसे स्टार्ट किया? चाइना ने उसको पेग करके स्टार्ट किया. हमारा करेंसी पेग नहीं है, राइट? वी आर नॉट पेग्ड, राइट? चाइना तो पेग्ड है, जिसमें एक लिमिटेड उसके साथ होता है. तो एक बहुत लॉन्ग ड्रॉन है, लेकिन धीरे धीरे ओवर द नेक्स्ट 10, 20 years, जैसे पेट्रो डॉलर का वो 100 साल का टर्म पूरा हो गया, तो धीरे धीरे मूव ऑन हो रहा है. धीरे धीरे, बहुत धीरे धीरे मूव होगा. एंड दैट विल बी वन ऑफ द बुल केसेस और आर्ग्यूमेंट्स फॉर इंडिया over the next decade or 2 decades, that our currency will become more accepted, and we will be more and more nations will be ready to trade with us in our own currency. But ये बहुत ही धीरे होने वाला है. उसका immediate impact on the stock market उस कारण से आपको नहीं दिखेगा.
So slow and quite slow but steady.
It's
Slow
a
and
very
gradual.
long drawn process.
Thank you. Thank you. Ashutosh, this next question is for you. Ashish has asked, what about the new age tech stocks which have been listed? Based on their current valuations, what is the future? How do you see their future?
देखिए, टेक तो सभी सेगमेंट्स में है.
हम्म.
अगर हम न्यूएस्ट टेक की बात करें तो वो आपको फूड डिलीवरी से लेके डिफरेंट प्लेटफॉर्म्स आर देयर. व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू से, सो मेनी प्लेटफॉर्म्स आर देयर. हु विल सक्सीड, ऑब्वियसली जिसको हम बोलते हैं टोटल एड्रेसेबल मार्केट्स तो बहुत ज्यादा है इंडिया में. बट हमने ये देखा है कि यू नो अल्टीमेटली माइक्रो स्ट्रक्चर्स मैटर, competitive इंटेंसिटी मैटर. कहाँ जो न्यूएस्ट टेक कंपनीज आ रही हैं वहां पे बैरियर्स टू एंट्री कैसे, जैसे हमने फूड डिलीवरी सेगमेंट में देखा, वहां पे इंडस्ट्री स्ट्रक्चर बहुत फेवरेबल था. तो obviously the journey to profitability is very different from so many companies which have come in fintechs have not succeeded. So I think it's not, you can make a case of a blanket case of more optimistic or pessimistic about newest tech. Having said that, tech-enabled जो platforms हैं, irrespective of whom they are catering to, definitely have an edge. You can reach out to your customer very fast. These companies can grow very fast. So I think there will be a lot of winners. We have already seen last 3-4 years, many multi-baggers have come from these new age tech companies. But at the same time, failure rate भी बहुत ज़्यादा होती है. तो इसमें I think you need to be, definitely you can't ignore these segments, but has to be looked at a case-to-case basis and focus on microstructures more than the macro narratives, which is कितना competition है, किस तरह की entry barrier है, just to
Right.
yeah.
Correct. Makes sense. Makes sense, Ashutosh. Thanks for that. Next question is by Mr. Anil Garg. His question vibes with a lot of us. He says that because most of the factors look positive when it comes to India. So we have an excellent tax collection, and India is going to be the third biggest economy in the coming times. Then why are we not bullish on the coming quarters? Because results impacts generally get nullified in couple of quarters. So, and the growth and the earnings season has been a mixed bag. So why that thought process that we need to be cautiously optimistic? So, Ashutosh, if you would like to throw some light, I'd also like to know from Rohit. I know Rohit would answer something around the earnings because we definitely are in that scenario where we need to see how the earnings are going to come, and
Yeah.
probably the results season does go out after 15 days, but earnings is what remains and the results is what remains. So, all right, Ashutosh, please.
Basically, valuation generally matter नहीं करते, but at an extreme, बहुत ज़्यादा महंगे हो जाए, बहुत सस्ते हो जाए, तो definitely they themselves become reason for the change in direction. तो कुछ पॉकेट्स में तो हमने वो देखा, कुछ पब्लिक गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग रिलेटेड जो नैरेटिव थे उसमें हम ऑलरेडी 30-40-50% का करेक्शन देख चुके हैं. आफ्टर मेनी मंथ्स आईपीओस भी अब थोड़े से फेल हो रहे हैं फाइनली से, और दे आर नॉट सक्सीडिंग टू दैट एक्सटेंट. तो आई थिंक थोड़ा सा एक कॉन्फिडेंस, मोर देन एनीथिंग एल्स, दैट आल्सो प्लेज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल इन शॉर्टर टाइम फ्रेम्स, राइट. कॉन्फिडेंस मुझे लगता है थोड़ा सा इम्पैक्टेड है, क्योंकि मार्केट में अगर आप ब्रेथ देखें, पिछले कई हफ्तों से वीक हो रही थी मार्केट ने. जब नया हाई बनाया भी तब भी ब्रेथ में वीकनेस थी. इसका मेन कारण हम सब डिस्कस कर रहे हैं कि जो इकोनॉमिक स्लोडाउन, अर्निंग स्लोडाउन में था, वो रहता है. एंड एट द एंड ऑफ द डे हमें कभी ये चीज नहीं भूलनी चाहिए कि मार्केट डेल्टा देखता है. डेल्टा मतलब रेट ऑफ चेंज. अगर आपकी एक्सपेक्टेशन अगर 25 की है, अगर आप 20 आते हैं, 20 ऑन इट्स ओन इज गुड, बट अगर पहले एक्सपेक्टेशन 25% ग्रोथ की है तो वो एक रीजन बन जाता है डिसअपॉइंटमेंट का. क्लासिक एग्जांपल हम देख रहे हैं चाइना वर्सेस इंडिया में. चाइना में एवरीवन नोज, इवन लेमन नोज कि स्ट्रक्चरली इट्स एन इंफीरियर स्टोरी, राइट. But time to time, when they will try to revive at a very lower valuation, they will try to revive versus India, which is a great long-term story, but
Yeah.
valuations are very high. And time to time, जहाँ पे हमारी पॉलिसी रिस्ट्रिक्टिव हो जाती है, रिलेटिव बेसिस पे ये शेकअप्स होते रहते हैं। और 2003 से 2007 का जो बुल मार्केट था, उसमें कई करेक्शंस ऐसे आए हैं, हमें ये ध्यान रखना चाहिए। ओनली प्रॉब्लम इज कोविड के बाद इंडियन इन्वेस्टर्स ने ऐसे कोई पीरियड नहीं देखे हैं जहां 3 या 6 महीने में पॉइंट टू पॉइंट रिटर्न नहीं बना है। एवरी टाइम जहां पे 2 हफ्ते का करेक्शन आया, लोगों ने लिया और 6 महीने में पैसा बना। आई थिंक ये थोड़ा नया हो सकता है, बिकॉज उस समय हर 6 महीने में अर्निंग में भी पॉजिटिव सरप्राइज आए थे, एटलीस्ट इनलाइन आ रही थी। अब वो चूंकि नहीं आ रही है, तो वो हमें ध्यान रखना होगा। और हम में से कोई भी कोई स्ट्रक्चरली नेगेटिव नहीं है। ऑल वी आर ट्राइंग टू से देयर आर सम अनसर्टेनिटी, मे बी सम इवेंट्स। जैसे जैसे इवेंट पास होते हैं, जैसे जैसे हम अगले साल की तरफ बढ़ते हैं, हमारे वैल्यूएशन सस्ते होते हैं, मार्केट में रिस्क रिवॉर्ड फेवरेबल हो जाएगा, और पॉकेट्स ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटीज तो हमें हमेशा मिलती ही रहती।
Correct, Ashutosh. Our next question is by Mr. Bajaj, and this is a rather long one. So this one is for you, Rohit. PSU Railways and Defense theme has seen significant correction and has seen some buying interest post-correction. Consumption is still not seeing any significant upturn. Chemicals and media looks interesting, and IT still seems to be in a not to touch category. Can you throw some light on this? And if there is any significant pain ahead due to macroeconomic factors, can we still see a significant correction on some global cues, which is still unseen, like US elections, Israel-Iran conflict, and yeah. So if you can throw some light on
या श्योर। तो पहले जियोपॉलिटिक और उस पर बात कर लेते हैं
Yeah.
कि क्या यूएस इलेक्शन जियोपॉलिटिक्स ऑफ इजराइल, ईरान, यूक्रेन, रशिया भूल गए हैं? तो अभी हम लोग भूल गए। तो ऑल ऑफ दीज, डू दे मैटर? द आंसर इज यस। बट आजकल अगर आप देखेंगे तो दुनिया में economies, countries, and markets have started to ignore some of these factors which are not long-term drivers of the stock market or the economies, and have started to look beyond them. जैसे कि रशिया यूक्रेन जब हुआ तब हम बहुत चिंतित थे। रशिया यूक्रेन के पहले नॉर्थ कोरिया, साउथ कोरिया था, तब हम चिंतित थे। उसके पहले चाइना का अरुणाचल में हमारे साथ चल रहा था, तब हम चिंतित थे। कहने का मेरा तात्पर्य ये है कि एट एनी पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम, आज के दिन हम जिस टाइप की दुनिया में हैं, कोई ना कोई जियोपॉलिटिकल सीन थोड़ा सा गड़बड़ाया हुआ होगा, लेकिन उसके कारण अपने देश की तरक्की ना रुके, ऐसा काम हमने किया है एज ए कंट्री, एंड हेंस मार्केट्स ने वो सब रिस्क को इग्नोर किया है। लेकिन जब मार्केट ऐसे लेवल्स पे आ जाता है कि आपको अर्निंग साथ दे रहा था तो आप इग्नोर कर रहे थे, लेकिन जब अर्निंग्स थोड़ी सी स्लो होती है, तब ये सब जो फैक्टर्स होते हैं ना, उनकी इंपॉर्टेंस बढ़ जाती है। क्यों? क्योंकि तब आपके दिमाग में आता है कि अरे ये तो पैसा निकल सकता है, अरे कल ऐसा हो सकता है। लेकिन जब अर्निंग आ रही थी तो वो प्रॉब्लम थोड़ी सी छुप जाती है। क्यों? क्योंकि आप ऐसा कंट्री ये प्रूव करते हो कि वो मैटर करता है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल अभी मैं बताता हूँ कि ईरान ईरान और इसराइल के से अभी क्या हुआ है। अभी रेड सी का फ्रेट हैव गॉन बजर्क, राइट? सो बहुत सारी कंपनीज जिनका एक्सपोर्ट होता है, उसके नंबर्स आए, नतीजे आप देखेंगे तो आपको दिखेगा कि उनके मार्जिन घट गए हैं, घट जाएंगे, क्योंकि फ्रेट इतना ज्यादा बढ़ गया है कि उनके लिए वायबल नहीं है। हालांकि वो भेज रहे हैं या कम भेज रहे हैं, तो उनके मार्जिन पे इम्पैक्ट आएंगे। मार्केट का ये मानना है कि ये शॉर्ट टर्म है, एंड हेंस वी स्टार्ट लुकिंग फॉरवर्ड। लेकिन आप समझिए, हम ये नहीं बोल रहे कि जीएसटी कलेक्शंस वीक है। हम बोल रहे हैं कि जीएसटी कलेक्शंस जो 20-25% पे ग्रो कर रहे थे, वो 20-25 पे अब ग्रो नहीं करेंगे। इंडिया की नॉमिनल जीडीपी अगर 12-13 पे ग्रो करेगी, तो आपका जीएसटी कलेक्शन 12 से 15-16 पे ही ग्रो कर सकता है। वो आपको कोविड का अपटिक था, उसके बाद अनऑर्गेनाइज से ऑर्गेनाइज का शिफ्ट था, जिसके कारण आपको कलेक्शन अर्निंग से ज्यादा दिख रही थी। वो नॉर्मलाइज हो रहा है। मार्केट का जो पी वन ईयर फॉरवर्ड 18-19 पे चलता था, वो 22-23 पे आ गया है। तो मार्केट से एक्सपेक्टेशंस बढ़ गई हैं। हमने कहा ना, हमने एक्सपेक्टेशंस बढ़ा दी हैं कि इंडिया हर टेस्ट मैच जीतेगा, हर मैच जो क्रिकेट का खेलेगा वो जीतेगा। उसके बाद अगर अचानक हारता है तो आपको मायूसी ज्यादा होती है। खाली उतना सही है लेकिन अगर हम ये सोचे कि इंडिया नंबर 1 टीम बनी है दुनिया की, तो बहुत अच्छा खेल के बनी है, बीच बीच में हारेगी, तो हमारे इमोशंस ही हमें बताएंगे कि नहीं, ठीक है, बीच बीच में ऐसा होगा। सेम तरीके से मार्केट में, जो कि एक लॉन्ग टर्म बुल मार्केट है, उसमें बीच बीच में जो थोड़ी ये सब दिक्कतें आएंगी, उससे थोड़े से करेक्शंस होंगे जो कि हेल्दी हैं। एंड हमारी कंट्री 12 से 15% की अर्निंग ग्रोथ पे चलेगी, एंड हमारा मार्केट भी उतना रिटर्न इवेंचुअली देगा। इज आवर व्यू। अब आ जाऊं, अगर आप थोड़े से सेक्टर्स की जो बात कर रहे थे, तो उस सेक्टर्स में अलग अलग आपको प्रायोरिटी डालने होंगे। अगर आप देखें डिफेंस एज ए सेक्टर, तो डिफेंस में क्या है, इंडिया ने बहुत सारी चीजों को इंडिजिनाइजेशन करने के लिए इंपोर्ट पे रोक लगा दी, कि ये पार्ट अब इंडियन डिफेंस कंपनीज को, इंडियन डिफेंस इंडिया में बनाने होंगे। तो वो मेक इन इंडिया हुआ है और हो रहा है। लेकिन आपको ये समझना है कि अब से नेक्स्ट 5 साल में उसका ग्रोथ रेट बढ़ेगा कि घटेगा। जो नया इंडिजिनाइजेशन होना है, जो बड़ी बड़ी चीजें इंडिजिनाइजेशन हमें करनी थी, वो हमने कर दी। इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि हम नेगेटिव है, लेकिन अब पूरा सेक्टर नहीं चलेगा। अब उस सेक्टर में से वो कंपनीज जो उस अपॉर्चुनिटी को, जो जिसमें और अभी इंडिजिनाइजेशन आना है, वो मेक इन इंडिया कर पाएंगी, वो चलेंगी। सेम विथ रेलवे। रेलवे के ट्रैक्स डलेंगे डलेंगे, रेलवे के कोचेस बनेंगे बनेंगे, वो सब सारी होंगी। इट्स द ग्रोथ रेट विच विल चेंज, विच विल डिटरमाइन विच कंपनी विल डू वेल। कहने का मतलब, अगर कोई कंपनी के लोगों का एक्सपेक्टेशन था कि नेक्स्ट 5 साल का अर्निंग 20% से ग्रो करने वाला है, वो 100 के पीई पे चल रहा था। अब अगर आपको लग रहा है कि वो अरे 20 नहीं 15-16 आने वाला है, तो 100 का पी 90 पे नहीं आता है, वो सीधा 60 पे या 50 पे या 40 पे आ जाएगा, क्योंकि आपके अर्निंग्स नॉर्मलाइज हो गए हैं। एंड दैट इज द ब्यूटी ऑफ इंडियन मार्केट, जहां एक्सपेक्टेशंस बहुत हाई होती है, बट अगर वो एक्सपेक्टेशंस मीट नहीं होंगी, तो थोड़ा सा वहां पे करेक्शन ज्यादा होता है, फिर नॉर्मलाइज हो जाता है। दैट्स वाई वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू चूज सेक्टर्स जहां आपको लगता है कि गवर्नमेंट की इन्वेस्टमेंट और देश का इन्वेस्टमेंट बहुत बड़ा होने वाला है। उस सेगमेंट्स में, जो कि मैंने बहुत अ, आपको मेंशन भी किया था, उस सेगमेंट्स में खेलेंगे, तो आपको ग्रोथ की विजिबिलिटी ज्यादा सालों तक दिखेगी। ज्यादा सालों तक ग्रोथ की विजिबिलिटी होगी, तो एक क्वार्टर अगर अर्निंग नहीं भी आया, तो मार्केट उसको माफ कर देगा। लेकिन आपकी विजिबिलिटी ही अगर 2 साल की है या 3 साल की है, उसमें अगर नंबर्स नहीं आएंगे, तो मार्केट विल नॉट स्पेयर दोज कंपनी। आई होप दैट आंसर।
Absolutely. So I think from what 2 years or 3 years we have seen a broad-based rally. Now the value we'll see the rally where, as you mentioned at the starting, it will be more stock specific. We need to figure out sectors and particularly the stocks where we see growth going forward. Rishi, any closing statements on Indian economic outlook from your end?
No, perfectly. I think Ashutosh and Rohit have given great pointers and sort of, I'll just put a sort of a summary to the overall longer term view, because I think some viewers, the questions, it seemed like they were sort of concerned. But I think what all of us are saying is that from a 10-15 year really long term perspective, India is great. Earnings growth, economy, macro, all of that is lining up very well, along with government policies and whatever else is required to enable the environment. From a 5 year perspective, also, it's great for many of the same reasons. And you can obviously drill down into a slightly shorter term perspective. It's only over the next, 3, 6, 9 months, I think, where all of us are a little sort of neutral to slightly cautious. And that is because, the fundamentals and macros and technicals and everything is really aligning to create that kind of environment. और जैसा कि आशुतोष ने भी कहा कि actually 2003 to 7 का bull run आप सब याद करिए. And we don't remember it because we've seen the last 2-3 years which have been very good and have been a very different kind of market. But actually the healthiest corrections and the largest corrections and the largest volatility comes in the best bull markets. So अगर हम सबका मानना है कि next 5 साल 10 साल 15 साल इंडिया के लिए बहुत अच्छा है, forget about the domestic flows. We are all used to saying that अरे अभी तो सिप्स आ रहे हैं, अब मार्केट 10-15% नहीं गिर सकता है. That is not true. Okay, we've had periods like that globally also. US markets have seen it, many other markets have seen it in the past. वो जब इनिशियली आते हैं उतने स्ट्रॉन्ग फ्लोज, तब मार्केट्स ऐसे बाय ऑन डिप्स और 5-6% शैलो करेक्शंस देता है. But then there are always events that happen, other things that happen that do give you larger corrections. So let's not be in that mindset that larger corrections cannot happen. Obviously there will be unknown events that bring it up. अगर हम known events की बात करें, US elections, geopolitics, ye wo. So known events will never give you the largest corrections. They will give you the normal corrections, normal volatility. Unknown events we can never gauge. तो वो आएंगे और वो ज्यादा बड़े करेक्शंस देंगे. लेकिन अगर हेल्दी बुल मार्केट में करेक्शंस हो रहे हैं, बहुत अच्छी बात है. और आप रियलाइन करिए पोर्टफोलियो. You get into stock specific, sector specific things like all the panelists have talked about. And I think that is the way to go from there. So longer term, bullish, shorter term, cautious, be opportunistic, tactical, and take advantage of the opportunities.
Thank you, Rishi. We'll just take one last question. Ashutosh, this question is for you. Which sectors have early indication of potentially lower earnings, deteriorating earning profile, and should be looked at with caution or should be avoided overall?
काफी सारे सेगमेंट्स हैं एक्चुअली ऐसे. एफएमसीजी में हमने देखा प्रॉब्लम एफएमसीजी में ये कि रिकवरी इतनी फास्ट नहीं होती है. इट्स नॉट टिपिकली सिक्लिकल सेक्टर, कुछ स्ट्रक्चर लग रहा है उसमें. कुछ अर्ली इंडिकेटर जो एक बड़ा बुल मार्केट हमने ऑटो स्टॉक्स में भी देखा, इट्स नॉट वेरी क्लियर कि वो उस तरीके का बुल मार्केट हम आगे देखेंगे. वहां पे भी हो सकता है जहां हमारी एक्सपेक्टेशन उस हिसाब से थोड़ा डिसअपॉइंटमेंट मिल सकता है. Lastly, I would say, there's no sign of revival in chemical as a sector also. बीच में लोगों ने expectation बढ़ा दी, stock चले भी. But purely from fundamental earning perspective, despite China stimulus, despite other commodities doing well, वहां पे भी ऐसा नहीं लगता कि कुछ material sign of revival है. And again, while पिछले 1-1.5 साल से कंपेयर करेंगे तो वैल्यूएशन सस्ते लगते हैं, बट फ्रॉम अ लॉन्गर टर्म पर्सपेक्टिव दैट अगेन लुक्स लाइक अ पॉकेट जहां अगर अर्निंग्स नहीं आती हैं तो इन्वेस्टर कुड सी सम डिसअपॉइंटमेंट्स.
Thank you, Ashutosh. With that, we will wrap up the session. Thank you so much, panel, for a very interesting and insightful session. Always a pleasure interacting with experts. Thank you to all the attendees. Street Experts will be back with more such interesting discussions. In case any questions remain unanswered, do reach out to us through your respective RMs or through our website www.mastertrust.co.in. With that, we would like to conclude this webcast. Thank you all for tuning in and a very happy Diwali. Thank you, panelists.